Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in to my talk today. As you can see from my title, I will be discussing a topic I find super interesting, and that is how adopting the cultural and technological shift seen in DevOps can help cloud security professionals and IT teams successfully implement a security strategy in the cloud. I currently work in cloud security, so I'm able to see the ups and downs firsthand and really take part in helping shift the security culture in a way that hasn't been done before. And this is a major concern with organizations that I've seen that I've worked with across the board who agree that current security capabilities and strategies are lagging behind cloud adoption. My goal today is to invoke critical thought when it comes to being a cloud security professional and how we can evolve as a community. On our agenda today, I will be introducing myself with some fun facts because my mama gave me manners and wanted you to learn a little bit more about me. Then I will be demystifying cloud security by clearing up some myths that seem to still be circling out there as we're maturing in the cloud. Then I'll explain how cloud security differs from traditional security models and why having a cloud focus or a cloud first, so to speak, security strategy is important. This will include current research and statistics, as well as some challenges being faced by organizations. And then we'll dive into what's called the shift left mindset from DevOps to DevSecOps and what that really means. And then we'll tie this all together in a nice little bow, and I'll give you some useful tips that you, if you are a security professional, can bring back to your teams, or if you're a person trying to get into cloud security or security in general, just some tips for you to think about as you're navigating your journey, so that way you have more knowledge to be empowered when you're joining teams and figuring out how to navigate this as a team. So some quick fun facts about me. My name is Dominique. I should have said that at the beginning, huh? My name is Dominique, and I'm currently a senior cloud security consultant for Ernst & Young. I call myself a factory-made security professional because I took the traditional route to get into the field. I did my undergraduate degree in computer information systems and then got a business graduate degree in cybersecurity. I've been working in technology for 8 years, with the last 5 being in cyber and cloud security, and kind of took my time building my experience through a variety of roles in sectors to build to where I am today. I am the founder of Security in Color, a weekly podcast covering cybersecurity news and cloud topics. I love to travel. I have a very ambitious goal of hitting every state in the US and then every country around the world. I'm a little bit behind this year, clearly, because of the pandemic, so now I have to go into overdrive, but I just love to travel. I am a passionate BTS and K-pop fan, and I evangelize wherever I can. And if I'm not binging or working, podcasting, these days I've been wrapped up in reading and video games and napping. I should have put napping. So if you're on Goodreads or if you have Animal Crossing, send me your send me your friend code. So we will begin our journey to building a cloud security strategy by first demystifying some common misconceptions that occur when it comes to cloud computing and cloud security. The 5 I present here, they're not all encompassing, but they are pretty common when you do your research and are questions that I have received in various situations about questions about the cloud. The first being, is the cloud, is unsafe? And this is a myth that for some reason, despite being debunked time and time again, seems to keep popping up, especially for non-IT people or those who maybe are a little bit behind. They might be in a sector that didn't really have a need to go to the cloud, and therefore they're still working, on premise, and they're just now learning about the capabilities of the cloud. There are still some skeptics out there, and when used properly, the cloud is safer than a typical data center. And one of the main answers to why it's safer is because the entire business model of public cloud providers is dependent on security. No business will move their data to a cloud service provider if they didn't verify it was safe to do so. Just as you wouldn't put your money in a bank you don't trust, same concept goes here. The top cloud service providers in the industry have invested millions of dollars in security, making sure they have the most up-to-date technology and secure operation centers. Majority of the issues that happen stem from things like poor security practices, really complicated controls, and having a rushed technology program. Which leads to our next myth of those who have the opposite mindset of our first, where they think, well, my cloud service provider, you know, they're a big top company, Google, Microsoft. I know if I put my data in there, I'm going to be secure no matter what. And deploying to the cloud with this kind of mindset will 9 times out of 10 lead to a breach. It will lead to something happening to your environment. Under the shared responsibility model, which we'll get to in a little bit, the cloud tenant, meaning the organization, is buying into the cloud. They have the ultimate responsibility of their data and is responsible for safeguarding it. The cloud service provider, or AKA CSP, which you'll hear me say pretty often, switching in and out. CSP means cloud service provider. They will ensure that their facilities are secure, their hardware isn't compromised, you know, like the underlying hardware and software is okay, but the customers are responsible for everything on top of that, building on top of that. Our third myth is regarding teams. And according to a 2018 cloud security report, 56% of surveyed security professionals said one of the main barriers in migrating to the cloud was a lack of expertise and training. And the myth here is that the people who built the on-premise infrastructure can adjust to the cloud. And as we know, that's simply not true. Security professionals as a whole, we do not get enough credit. And it's important to empower, train, and leverage the teams you currently have in place. Now, it's a different story if maybe you don't have the resources to hire more staffing, but to say that your current staff doesn't have the ability to do something, I think is really undermining their intelligence and what they can do for you, the value that they have for your company. Our fourth myth is the one that will lead us into further discussion later on in the presentation, but security has always been an outlier in many equations. Our teams are looked at with a side eye. We're brought into discussions far too late with far too much disdain to think that we can effectively do our jobs. It has been perpetrated that DevOps teams turned to public clouds in the first place because they just couldn't afford to wait for the turnaround time that the security legacy procurement process took. And this acceleration to market introduced security gaps because other teams didn't think that security can be a part of rapid deployment, when in actuality, the cloud is being enabled and empowered by DevSecOps. And last but certainly not least, many businesses deploy into the cloud with the same on-premise strategy, thinking, well, it's enough to cover both environments. And while I can agree, the underlying foundation of security can be translated to the cloud, meaning the basic security controls, a little bit more of my mindset in the on-premise can also be translated to the cloud, to the different services they have here. The problem that many organizations have with this mindset is they don't understand their role and responsibility in the cloud or how compliance works. They deploy in the cloud thinking, hey, I'm fully secure and I'm just out here wasting money, and then they get a bad taste in their mouth and they don't want to move forward. And you can prevent all of these future headaches by turning to a cloud-first mindset and strategy. Which brings us to our next topic regarding security on-premise versus security in the cloud. Cloud security can be defined as the protection of data, applications, and infrastructure involved in cloud computing. Many aspects of security for cloud environments, whether that's public, private, or hybrid cloud, or multi-cloud as they say, are the same as for many on-premise IT architecture. High-level security concerns like weak access controls, unauthorized data exposures, being susceptible to threats and attacks, or having your availability disrupted, that affects whether or not you're on-premise or in the cloud. And both of these environments really require security to maintain adequate and preventative protections so you know your data and your system are safe. You can see and understand your current security posture, immediately if something unusual happens, and then be able to investigate and respond quickly. In cloud computing, this means understanding things like the shared security model, which I just alluded to, is also to understand the different cloud deployments and service models, so public versus private versus hybrid, and infrastructure as a service versus platform as a service versus software as a service, or IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. It's important to know there because each one of those deployments has its own level of security controls that you apply to it. And additionally, there are just a plethora of benefits for business to take advantage of, like scalability, efficiency, things like that would differ from the really slow and costly singular model we're used to seeing in legacy processes and systems. And just to give a better visual of the shared responsibility model that I talked about previously, this model, or I should say this graph, really shows the delineation of responsibility between businesses and a provider. So customers, meaning your business and your IT security teams, are responsible for security in a given cloud environment. And this means that the customer configures things like protecting customer data, PII, PHY, XYZ. You have to deal with application security in IAM, or identity and access management. You have to configure and install the appropriate OS, configure the firewall, and things like encryption. Whereas the CSP takes care of security of the cloud. So they deal with making sure like the regions you deploy in, they're durable, they're available, they're secure. They also deal with security of storage, networking, and things like security at the edge. There are plenty of in-depth white papers for each CSP on how they deal with security and responsibility. And as someone who is interested in getting into security, I highly encourage you to go to each one of them and really understand this model and what it entails. So that way you can speak to it when you're joining teams that might want to go into cloud model, especially if you're interviewing. Like if you know, say, hey, you know, what is your current cloud posture now? How is it that you're implementing security here? Like, being knowledgeable and be able to speak to those things will really help you. So now that we've clarified some misconceptions, let's jump into understanding why knowing how to create a strategy as a security professional is important, and why the on-premise mindset that you had doesn't always necessarily apply in the cloud. The public cloud is no longer a what if for organizations. Cloud adoption is pioneering the next wave of technological evolution, with 65% of enterprises currently relying on public clouds and $354 billion predicted to be spent worldwide by 2022. But as you know, migrating to the cloud is not a small feat, and innovation spending costs a lot of money. Research shows that with every $1 you spend on innovation, you will spend another 7 on execution. And the reason for this is because traditional data centers are not modernized for cloud adoption. And it really forces a business to invest in new technology and train the teams to operate these new systems. The impact of cloud adoption affects the entire organization, not just IT and security teams anymore. This means operation teams are involved, marketing, HR, any team that deals with data and separate systems are now a part of the equation in the cloud. All existing processes and controls should be a fundamental part of the shift. And the important question that should be asked is, well, what is the underlying motivation to move to the cloud? Do you need a major hardware or software refresh? Is this caused by new regulations upon your industry, like when GDPR came and disrupted everything, or recently CCPA came into effect for those living in California? There's new regulations that's going to come in the future, and that will always require businesses to be able to adapt quickly. Whatever it is, that knowledge is important for you to have in hand so you can begin a path of success for cloud adoption and maximize value from it. Otherwise, you will wind up draining whatever budget you thought you were going to save and be stuck looking like Mr. Chappelle here. In cloud adoption, there are some understood stages during the journey for organizations. The name of each stage may differ. Some models have 4, some have 5. It really just depends on where you're getting your concepts of, but regardless, the journey overall is the same. And to begin, you have gap analysis. And this is really where security teams will start taking a detailed inventory of the application and production workloads in their data center. And this is really crucial for generating a cost estimate and preliminary budget, which is an important skill to know how to do, learning how to quantify your data and applications. Next, we'll have what is called get moving. It's called get moving here, but it's also been called like foundation or testing phase in other places, but this is where teams will begin to test in the cloud. They'll replicate a single workload using best practices just to make sure that, or just to kind of see how it will react to the environment to make sure they're doing things properly. And then we have the planning and migration phase. These two phases, teams are continuing to build upon the gap analysis that we did in the first place, and they create a profile for the applications in their environment. So this includes understanding your server applications, like what are they running on, what servers your applications are running on, what systems and support requirements they need, making sure you're identifying appropriate stakeholders. And this planning phase will let you know how much of your resources are actually being used. That way you can correctly provision these shifted applications in the cloud. This is also the stage where learning how to create automated processes through scripts and templates is really key. And deploying in this manner is called infrastructure as a code, and is a topic that more and more teams are looking to build into their processes to manage their infrastructure instead of the normal manual process that has been going on. It is an aspect that will dramatically simplify cloud migration and make the process pretty seamless. And lastly, we have optimization. Here's where you say, congratulations, you made it to the cloud, what's next? Well, now that your workloads have migrated, you should be constantly optimizing to ensure peak performance and continuously modernizing. Now, I wanted to go through an overview of these steps for two reasons. One was to introduce what the cloud journey looks like for those who might not be familiar. But two, and my main reason, is for you to understand the current state of where security is brought into the pipeline and why challenges continue to occur. It is here, after the migration stage and before optimization, that organizations will begin to assess their security posture and ask questions like, is my code secure? Do we have the right tools in place? Have I done my due diligence? When it is here, in the beginning of this journey, that those questions should be asked. And this continuous mindset of bolting on security in the cloud is why security challenges continue to be faced by organizations across the board. Challenges such as the following are seen no matter what sector you're in or where you work. Without a sound strategy outlining how to address these challenges prior to deploying into production and longer than a week before you're about to go into production, teams more than likely will be navigating their environment blindly, possibly creating more issues than they bargained for. Of course, at the top of this list and at the top of everyone's mind is about the potential for a data breach, trying to figure out how do I protect my data. Many of the following challenges add in a layer of complexity to data protection that makes it tough for security teams to completely wrap their head around how to properly secure data in the cloud. Lack of visibility is a big top two and is related to both public, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments, where the lack of control and service visibility into a business's cloud environment becomes a major problem for security and IT teams. Legacy in-house infrastructure is entirely under the control of companies, whereas cloud services delivered by third parties don't offer that same level of granularity. Therefore, organizations can fail to identify potential risks, and when you can't visualize something, you can't address it. With compliance, there are certain sectors like healthcare and finance that have heavy legislative requirements when it comes to the storage and processing of private data, or PII. Achieving full compliance in a public or private cloud introduces more complexity to adoption, and many businesses think, well, if I use a cloud vendor that is compliant, then I'm compliant. And that answer is completely false. But unfortunately, there's 51% of firms in the United States that think the statement of compliance is all they need to say that they are compliant, and they are really quickly setting themselves up for failure and heavy fines. Proper IT governance should ensure that IT assets are implemented and used according to agreed upon policies and procedures, ensuring that assets are properly controlled, they're maintained, and that they are supporting your organization's strategy and business goals. Insecure APIs, aka application programming interfaces, is another way for a customer to manage their cloud environment. Unfortunately, not every API is entirely secure. While they might have been maybe initially when you first started, later on, they can be deemed unsecure. And once a customer builds their application layer on top of this, you're potentially exposing private data. Now we have heard over and over and over again about the 2 million job gap in cybersecurity, and in cloud security, businesses are really seeing the glaring risk this is posing to their cloud adoption strategy. Organizations are moving their workloads to the cloud at a rapid pace, and with cloud technology continuing to advance as well, they're having a hard time trying to keep up. And the success of cloud adoption and migrations really comes down to the people. When people try to introduce or talk about automation, a lot of people get a little bit afraid of, well, this is going to take away from my process, this is going to take away from my job, and really, it really is empowering your job. Humans or people are still needed in the process of cybersecurity, and they always will be. And it's really important for organizations to invest in talent transformation programs. And until you focus on the number one bottleneck, which is getting your teams really empowered and knowing about how to work these tools in the cloud and really understand about it, improvements made anywhere else are going to be an illusion. An illusion that is starting to be realized and reported on, because according to a cloud security survey by ICC Squared, last year, 93% of surveyed security professionals say they are moderately to extremely concerned about cloud security. Now, this is an uptick from the report from the previous year, which had 90%, and really speaks to the increased threat landscape security professionals are experiencing in the cloud. And this number just underscores the complexity that will still continue to happen unless a shift in strategy, technology, and mindset happens. As cloud maturation increases, businesses are beginning to recognize the significant impact that management decisions about cloud strategy and implementation really have on a company. The design of cloud-native features are vastly different from the traditional IT setting, and a lack of strategy during implementation is increasingly opening organizations up to more risk than they bargained for. Continuing to roll out into the cloud inappropriately will increase an organization's overall operating budget, wiping away any benefit hoped to be gained from leveraging the cloud. The cloud only decreases in cost when it is rolled out appropriately. So as a quick agenda check, so you can see where we're progressing in this journey, I've clarified some misconceptions. We defined the current state of cloud security. We included some challenges and explained why a revamp is necessary. And I'm sure by now you're asking, well, how do I go about actually creating a strategy? And how does DevSecOps fit? Well, let's answer that by breaking down and explaining what it means to shift left in the development pipeline and how applying the culture of DevSecOps to cloud security can help solve a lot of the challenges I spoke to before being faced. If you're a current security professional or perhaps part of a developer team, you're probably familiar with the shift left or the DevSecOps terminology. A shift left means that security is being built into the process and designed into the application at an earlier stage of the pipeline, instead of where it is historically have been brought into as demonstrated by the graphic. So at the top, similar to what I had before, at the top, security testing is right between release and deploy, where this should have been brought in earlier, as you can see from the bottom, where security is really at every iteration of the step in the pipeline. And the shift left mindset is usually in reference to the software development lifecycle, which has a goal to increase quality. It reduces the amount of time required for testing, but most importantly, it mitigates the risk of security problems at the end of the cycle, when it is much more expensive and time consuming to make fixes. There are a ton of ways that DevSecOps is explained and pictured, but they all pretty much tell the same story. The DevSecOps methodology merges DevOps, which is development and operations, with SecOps, which is security and operations, creating a cyclical practice for software development, technology operations, and cybersecurity. The goal of DevSecOps is to promote the fast development of a secure code base, but most importantly, and in my opinion, the DevSecOps methodology helps developers, operations, and security professionals find a healthy a balance that is desperately needed for the success in the cloud. Now, as I stated earlier in highlighting current security challenges, an overwhelming number of businesses in various stages of their cloud adoption, still have big questions, even if they're in production. And I really think the DevSecOps methodology, if implemented correctly, can answer a lot of these unknown questions and break the regular trend of having security as a separate process when we should be integrated with all of within the process. Many organizations, from startups to Fortune 500s, they still have this bolt-on security mentality. And without breaking these counterproductive norms that have plagued our industry for so long, it will always feel like we're playing catch up during a technological evolution. And we'll always be in a really reactive state rather than proactive. As security professionals, we want to be proactive. Yes, we want to be able to react when things happen and be able to react quickly, solve an issue, have lessons learned, and figure out how we can improve. But really, we want to try to strive for a proactive where we have the tools and processes in place to address something very early, to really prevent things from happening. So DevSecOps calls for integration across all stages of the software process change and really addresses security concerns at the very first instance. And the following are 6 factors in DevSecOps that can aid in successfully implementing security in the cloud. So things like security analysis and assessment, that's important so you understand your application infrastructure, which is really your foundation, and ensuring you have policies in place to support your life cycles. Automated testing minimizes efforts, it saves time, it's a key aspect of the DevSecOps process, and it really helps make things easier and more repeatable. Change management is about linking teams, making sure that each team is aware of each other's operations, and is an important aspect of change management. Keeping developers informed about security-related activities helps with addressing possible vulnerabilities in a timely manner. Compliance monitoring, compliance continues to play a key role in a business's ability to grow, and regulations help in the creation of code and modifying the source code. Threat investigation is important for defining security readiness. It's important for organizations to have a close and continuous watch, making sure you're discovering possible threats, you're doing regular scanning, and code reviews to address security challenges. Personnel training, we've alluded to before, having hands-on training sessions, certifications, really building up your team. And these 6 steps really act as a building block for implementing DevSecOps in the cloud. By embracing a shift left mentality in the public cloud, with DevOps and security, organizations can really see benefits such as cost savings, as I alluded to before, because they're going in with this mentality of, I already have processes in place on premise. The cloud can't be that difficult. I can do this without having to restructure my entire process or restructure my entire way of being. I can do whatever, and then they wind up going into the cloud, or they wind up deploying into cloud, shifting their data into the cloud, and realize they did it wrong and have to start all over. And that winds up costing them money and time, and they probably have to bring in a third-party consultant to do it, which costs them even more money. You can also see the benefit of risk reduction. There's lower security compromising, quality control, and even an enhanced corporate culture. When done successfully, businesses are tangibly seeing rapid acceleration in the way they're able to remediate applications and significantly increase security at the same time. Risk reduction to the organization can be realized at multiple levels. So you can not only deploy infrastructure and applications quickly, but you can also mitigate things like ransomware. That's something that has been a big threat to organizations in the past couple of years, and honestly probably isn't going away. And you can address things like that very quickly in the cloud. Now, DevSecOps only works if your organizations are willing to give their teams the resources and tools necessary to bridge the skills and resource gaps they are facing. It is important to first address the issues with your current posture, understanding the capacity of your current teams, and finding a guiding principle to drive your development. And here are some tips that you can bring back to your teams or start to think about where to start. And the first being that security needs like a quick humbling moment here. And I know it's a little bit blasphemous to say that security needs to adapt to other teams, but because it's really been a large, at least when I was coming up, and that's something I've always heard, it's either a my way or the highway or a data breach mentality, or, you know, there's a lot of scare tactics that are used to get what we want, you know, going forth in our organization. And that isn't effective anymore. It has largely left us on the outside looking in. Development and security teams do not speak the same language. We're not motivated in the same way, but we do have the same bottom line, or the business bottom line, that we're trying to get to, right? And the idea is to integrate security as a continuous part of the pipeline. We cannot do that if we force others to adopt our old processes of information security, or if we're continuously left in the dark because no other team wants to work with us, or, you know, let us know what they're thinking of at the beginning if they think we're just gonna kind of tear them down. The second, I've already alluded to, spoken to about a lot, is about automation. As a quick reminder, the term shift and left, you know, we're inserting security into the process at the beginning and throughout. It's an iterative process. And the reason this has largely been ignored is because developers and other teams view security processes as outdated and that would be a hindrance to production. Automation changes this relationship between security and other teams, and adopting automation enables teams to add more checks for security concerns, downstream compliance, you know, auditing purposes, all of that good stuff. That way we can keep up with the ever-changing threat landscape. The third, about training your teams, is something, again, that I've spoken to before and I keep bringing up because it really is powerful in terms of not just training your security teams, which of course is going to be using the technology, but I've talked to many developers who stated that security doesn't come into the equation for them until they begin architecting their own solutions later in their career. And from the gate, they're just worried about making a product, you know, making sure it works, they can meet their deadlines, and they really are leaving security as an afterthought. And then other departments like HR, marketing, whoever, you know, who link software as a service applications into your environment when you're in the cloud, you know, they don't know how to do a security due diligence or know when to even include security, right? If they're looking at something that they're trying to connect to, you know, your GCP environment, and they're like, you know, this looks secure, everyone is using it, but it doesn't pass maybe your security guidelines. You might be a company that's under really strict regulation, and you're like, no, I need to make sure that I have to have a due diligence on paper. I have to talk with the developers. I need to make sure that they are PCI or XYZ compliant. You know, they don't know that. And we don't expect people to become security experts, but they need to have some knowledge of the subject. And that's on us to have security awareness throughout the entire organization. So when I say train everyone, that's just not your security or IT teams or people who are going to be working with or securing the data or the applications. It's really everyone. Everyone is a part of this process now. And the last tip is to use a security champion model. Here, you would have an individual who will act as an expert and advisor in your organization. Such an advisor, you know, they can spot potential design and implementation issues really early. This champion can really reduce the complexity of security, so that way it's not just on one team or on one person. You're building kind of a community of security throughout your organization, and it's really changing the culture of your organization. That is important. It's changing the culture of security throughout your organization and really getting people to think like, hey, I'm about to do such and such. Maybe I should run this by the security team to see what implications that has, rather than after the fact when I've already done something, I've already accepted something or signed off on something, and it's a little bit too late and something has happened and I'm like, okay, I need to involve security. So some key takeaways from this presentation: DevSecOps is all about integrating teams to pool resources. We want to better leverage skills, and we really want to realize common goals and perspectives. Success with DevSecOps comes with being cloud curious and learning what matters most to your organization. I always like to say that you're always a student. I think someone said that earlier about always being a student and being open to learning. With the cloud, that's definitely it. You're not only a part of a technology change, but it really is about getting people more aware of what's happening in their environment, so that way you can have visibility and you know what's happening. And this really is an opportunity to take a modernized security stack to the cloud, in addition to business innovation. And it's a fresh start to security, forecasting increased visibility, like I just said, and really taking things to scale while being agile for your company. So some 3 takeaways. If you're not transforming your current security team, or if you're not being transformed, if you're a part of a team, the business is really losing out on some serious potential, and will more than likely probably have teams that will leave them for better opportunities, or your company is just going to take really long and not really reap any benefits from the cloud. And like I said before, that can leave a bad taste for businesses who are saying, well, I'm not reaping any benefits, I'm not seeing how the cloud is helping. It's more than likely because you're just not implementing a strategy right and are not empowering the teams that you currently have. Second, if you're holding on to your existing security capabilities and mindset in the cloud, more than likely you're going to fail, or if not fail, be very difficult for you. The shift to DevSecOps, again, more than technology, it's culture. And without that, trying to implement this methodology will fail, and implementing the cloud will just continue to be a hindrance. And then, third, everything. And you're gonna have bumps along the way. You're gonna have to iterate. It's gonna be long. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna require a lot out of you, but it really is worth it, because once you get to see the tangible results of the transformation that you have in the cloud as a business, and even as a security professional, right? I see what the process I used to do early on in my career of expanding my company. Like, I used to work at a museum, and we used to have to kind of scale up our inventory in order to adjust for putting in a new exhibit that was coming. The process that it took for me to do that on premise, and what can be done now at scale in the cloud within a couple of minutes, really is a game changer. I really enjoy the field that I work in, and really helping businesses understand how to do this correctly, and then really helping security professionals learn how to address this empowers them and the business that they work in. So that is my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on social media or LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to answer questions here or after the rest of the presentations or at a later time. My website for Security in Color is securityincolor.com, and the podcast is just Security in Color on all platforms. And thank you.